Hey everyone, welcome to our first college basketball edition of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
All right, Joe, fresh off a really banner week for Bruce Pearl's Auburn Tigers. They went into Coleman Coliseum and beat a ranked Alabama team, which is something that Bruce Pearl has not done many times. I think he'd only won like one other game at Coleman. And in fact, I think Auburn in their entire history had only beaten three ranked Alabama teams in Tuscaloosa. And then he followed that up by beating Ole Miss at Oxford, which was a huge win because even though Ole Miss, hasn't really been great at basketball while Pearl has been there, they've had his number. I mean, he had Kermit Davis especially had a winning record against Bruce Pearl, and I think he actually had a losing record against Ole Miss too. So these were two really big wins for him, and ones that conventional wisdom would have thought would have led Auburn to getting the number one overall ranking. And despite having more number one votes than Gonzaga, I think it was 34 to 25 due to the low rankings of some, including one that I'm going to go into in particular later. Gonzaga ended up getting the number one overall ranking over Auburn, who's at number two.
Yeah, it surprised me when I saw it because at this time of the year, you normally see like the last remaining undefeated team is number one at this point. If there's not an undefeated team, they usually go to the next team with like the fewest losses. And I thought that would be Auburn here.
Yeah, Auburn at this point has more wins than anyone else in the country. They're 16-1. There's only a couple other teams that only have one loss, and of course they have more wins than them. And Auburn also has a lot of quad one wins too. Alabama's a quad one win. LSU is. They won a couple other games. And the only loss they've had all season is at UConn in double overtime. So if you want to be a complete stickler, you could say they're undefeated in regulation. And then what's even more frustrating is Gonzaga's got two losses, and one of those losses came to Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And so the fact that they lost to Alabama, which a team that Auburn beat on the road, also is one that's kind of puzzling. And, this Auburn team just keeps on dominating. Right now they're playing Georgia, who's not a very good team. They've only got 5 wins, but they're beating them by 25 points, and it's not even that far into the second half. And it just goes to show you, I think this is definitely Bruce Pearl's best team. It's one that, unlike his team he had in 2019 that made the Final Four, not a lot of seniors on this team. It really is. He's built a team that's just straight talent. Jabari Smith, the forward, is 6'11", probably going to be the number one overall pick in this year's NBA draft, which I don't know that Auburn's ever had a number one overall pick before. I think Isaac Okoro got up to number 4. That's probably the best they've ever had. And, they also have Walker Kessler now, who's doing such an excellent job, the transfer from North Carolina. And it just kind of goes on and on. My favorite player, though, is Wendell Green, who kind of reminds me a lot of Jared Harper. Little guy, he's super fast, really good free throw shooter, and he's got that kind of range that Jared Harper did too, where he could just line up from almost half court and just drill shots. And I just really think that the chemistry of this team may even be stronger than what they had in 2019.
I think so. This is definitely, one of those teams where you feel like they're on, the short list to win the national title, no question. Look like, number one seed. I think 3 years ago, that was more of like a feel-good story. It's like, we kind of did better than we expected and made a Final Four run. This year, it's kind of like you feel like you want to win a championship, getting into the tournament.
That's right, Joe. You kind of feel almost like Auburn now, where Baylor was last year. Baylor's a team that had made they made a Final Four or two with Scott Drew before that, but those kind of felt fluky and kind of new. And when they made it last year, you were like, okay, this is a great team. They had been all season. We've seen this as an established program. And it didn't shock you when they won it all last year. And I kind of feel like that's kind of where Auburn is now, too. The way Bruce Pearl has built this program, he's got them in that area now where I think Auburn fans can legitimately expect every year they should at least go to the Sweet 16. And this is a team that, you definitely is Final Four bust and really, a team that you feel like should be playing for it all.
I think they've got a great chance. The big thing I would say, is that they probably wouldn't hurt them probably to lose one game down the stretch of the season, just because even though they're not undefeated, I feel like if teams get into the NCAA tournament almost too hot, at some point you're going to have that cold shooting night. So that's the only thing I could think just to kind of nitpick.
Right. And, we were talking about it. They're number two right now. There's only been one other time in program history when Auburn reached number two. And that, of course, was the great team with Chris Porter, Mamadou Njah, and Scotty Pullman that they had in 1998 and 1999. That team ended up getting a number one overall, got a number one overall seed. They were number two. And the only team they lost to, and they lost to them actually, I think, three times during the season, was Kentucky. They had three losses. All of them were to Kentucky, and they didn't win the SEC basketball tournament because they lost to Kentucky. And with having the only one number one seed we've ever had, they actually lost to Ohio State in the Sweet 16 by like 1 point. And I think Ohio State made the Final Four but didn't win it that year. And that's, I remember going to see that team in person when I was a kid, and it just blew my mind because they were so good. Chris Porter was just an amazing athlete. I remember he had a dunk one time where he jumped from the 3-point line and basically went fully extended, almost horizontal, and dunked it. And I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And that team the next year brought everybody back, but couldn't follow it up. And that was kind of the way Cliff Ellis was. He could get in a lot of talented players, but he never really developed them that well. And, point being that team right there, you could kind of see that was a flash in the pan, but you definitely see with what Bruce Pearl has right now that Auburn's here to stay.
I think so. And, so the level of recruiting, having Jabari Smith, on your campus, and, just kind of the NBA future that you expect him to have, I think that bodes really well for recruiting going forward. But you got, depth around him. You've got a good team around him. So I think they've really got a good chance this year. I'm going to be interested to see when they match up against Kentucky, kind of how that goes. Like, really don't see anybody else in the SEC. I know A&M's kind of had a little bit of surprising, good start, but it's hard to really see too many challengers in the SEC right now.
No, and with that being said, this is the strongest the SEC's been in a while. I looked at Joe Lunardi's updated bracketology yesterday, and he's got 7 SEC teams making the NCAA tournament, and that's second only to the Big 12, which he has 8 teams making it in. And right now there's a lot of depth, but really at the great team level, Auburn's the only one that's at the great level. Kentucky could maybe get up to that, but right now they're not a great team. And so you definitely got to like Auburn as the favorite. And Joe, talking about that ranking, they didn't get to number one overall. And there's actually one person that Auburn fans can blame for it. And he has been getting lit up on Twitter all week. His name is Jesse Newell, and he is the beat writer for the Kansas Jayhawks, and also covers them in basketball and football. And Joe, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there amongst Auburn, which I'm going to propagate it right now because I think it's probably true. The last time that Auburn and Kansas played each other, I believe that it was an Auburn beatdown in the 2019 NCAA tournament, where Kansas was a team that a lot of people thought were going to make the Final Four, take a run. And Auburn beat them so bad that a lot of people wanted to fire Bill Self after that game. And this Jesse Newell guy, the last 2 years, he's consistently ranked Auburn way beneath everyone else. In fact, there was a week last year where Auburn, I think, was ranked number 11 overall, and Newell didn't even have Auburn ranked in their top 25. And this week, he had them listed at number 9. At number 9, they have one loss. They're 16-1. They've beaten 5 quad 1 teams, and somehow he justified having him at number 9. And guess who he had ranked above him, Joe?
Who's that?
Kansas.
Yeah, surprise.
It's just surprise. He's a really objective, picker. And it's funny. He's like, answered all these questions, says he has some kind of advanced analytics way that he does things, and that's why he put Auburn at 9. But he's the only person, I think, that ranked him beneath 7, and there was only one other guy that put him at 7. Everyone else had him in the top 4. And apparently, Joe, if he had even ranked him like 7 or 8, Auburn would have gotten number 1. But because he ranked him all the way at 9, that's why Auburn didn't get to achieve number 1 overall in America for the first time in the history of their college basketball program.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if somebody was arguing and wanted to make a case for maybe like a Duke or Gonzaga over Auburn, I might listen to that debate. Like, I think some arguments could be made, but I can't think of any arguments to be made to put him as low as number 9. Like, I would love to hear like the litmus test for why he did that. I'd like to hear him try to justify that ranking, because it just does not make any sense at all. It's almost like one of those debates that we had talked about kind of jokingly before locker room talk about the college football playoff committee saying that, no, we just know this team's better than this team,
right,
even though the record says otherwise.
Yeah, well, I know that they have Auburn on their uniform, therefore they're not as good as Duke, Kansas, Kentucky. I think he had Kentucky at 7. He had Kentucky ranked ahead of Auburn too. And Gonzaga and all these teams. And Joe, the worst part about it was he still had Baylor at 2, even though they lost back-to-back games last week. I mean, obviously this dude doesn't watch college basketball, or he just has completely unobjective rankings that don't really make sense.
You would think he would at least know the Big 12 results with Baylor.
Yeah, you would think so, right? So he's been fodder all week. You can look on Twitter. You find at Jesse Newell. People have been making fun of him that are Auburn fans all week. And guess what? He deserves it, because that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, like I said, I think you're right. You can make an argument that Gonzaga should be up there. I mean, Gonzaga is a very excellent team. They've been up there all season. Duke, a really great story with them really being the only great team in the ACC. Before what Baylor had last week, you could have definitely said with what they had done, won 21 games in a row, but they dropped a couple last week. USC dropped a game last week. UCLA dropped a game last week. So did Arizona. And so all these teams dropped out, and then you just have Auburn dominating. And so it makes no sense for anyone to have them, I think, even below number 2, frankly.
No, I think so too. You almost wonder if this guy is like some kind of conspiracy for clickbait to get his, coverage more news. Like to me, there's nothing else that makes sense about objectively putting them with this ranking.
That could be it, Joe. He's probably gotten mentioned more this week than he maybe ever has before. So that could be something to that. I'm sure he got more tweets this week than he ever has before with writing for the Kansas City Star.
I think so.
All right, Joe. Well, with that being said, Auburn right now, they're comfortably ahead of Georgia, beating them by 20+ points. And, looking at it this way, Joe, if the season were to end today, who do you think your number 1 overall seeds are? Obviously, we got Auburn and Gonzaga there. Do you think that Duke and UCLA are probably going to be your other 2?
I think right now I would go Arizona and Duke. UCLA could get up there. I think they feel like they're still in the top 10, that loss. But, Johnny Juzang and company, they're still going to be a factor. But I really like Arizona right now. They've got a great front court. Purdue's another team, to watch as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Arizona with Tommy Lloyd has been a great story. That Mark Few has really become an item in college basketball because now he's starting to develop a coaching tree. And you see it with his main assistant, Tommy Lloyd, doing great things at Arizona.
That's right. So, the 4 number 1 seeds is going to be an interesting debate, though. I feel like this year feels like it could be like a handful of teams. Like it could be, at this point, I could make an argument, I feel like, for 7 or 8 teams. So it feels like a fluid debate.
That's right, Joe. And now I would love to see Duke get one of those spots because this is the farewell tour for Mike Krzyzewski. It's going to be his last season, and it's going to be tough sledding for anyone that takes on him in the NCAA tournament this year because, there's going to be a lot of want to on his part, and probably a lot of reasons that officials might want to put Duke forward in this one. So I definitely see Duke making a deep run this year.
I think so. We see it many times, when a coach announces that this is going to be, their last ride, you'll see a team play kind of above their heads. Yeah, I would be surprised if you don't see Duke make at least like a Final Four appearance this year.
All right. And with that being said, we'll be back next week, talk a little bit more college basketball, and we'll look at championship weekend in the NFL. And you can like us on Facebook, on our Facebook fan page. And then, of course, you can listen to all of our episodes on Spotify. And look up the Dan and Joe Sports Show on Spotify. And also look up our YouTube page that we have now, too, and subscribe to that. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.